In this special edition, we are covering Heritage Day and what the importance and significance is of Heritage Day. And I'm sitting with Lutfi Omar, the chairperson of the Salt River Heritage Society. How are you doing?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Alhamdulillah. Look, with Heritage Day, it's important that we celebrate and we commemorate the histories of our past people that went before us, and those stories are not documented. It's not in our history books. So we're looking at stories of local people, of ordinary people, of that contributed to who we are today, and what we are today. So we're looking at, heritage is about people, about ordinary people, about their stories. It is of preserving memories, and it's basically preserving community voices, which we feel is often neglected, in our society. And it's important that the community has a voice in their own history. So we compile and we document these stories. Heritage is also about identity of who we are, and that's also a story of because we came from an apartheid era. It's a story of colonization.
Yes.
It's a story of dispossession. It's a story of persecution, slavery. So it's a huge story, and that story, like I said, is not in our history books. We're looking at decolonizing history. So we're trying to also bring up history from the bottom, history from the ordinary people. Yes, yes.
Yeah, as a child, I was very fascinated by superheroes. And I always struggled with the fact that there were no superheroes that looked like me, and I couldn't relate to. But what I did have was my parents, and they would often talk about the struggle and the things they went through, and how much they had to fight for that freedom, and the people around them had to fight for the freedom. And also how much of the identity was taken and they had to reclaim. So for me, heritage is quite a significant idea. And so I'm just wondering, for Salt River, what does heritage mean for the community?
Well, Salt River's got a rich tradition of various cultural practices. So within heritage, you have the tangible parts, and then you have the intangible, what we call the intangible cultural heritage. And so Salt River's got a rich history, so and it's diverse as well. So you would have the Salvation Army, from the church marching through the streets, or you would have the St. Luke's Church on Ash Wednesday, also marching through the streets. Then on Eid days, you would have the children, or before Eid, you have in Ramadan, children taking cookies around, to the neighbors and so on. And then on Eid day, obviously, you would go and greet all your neighbors, and you go and say Slamat to everyone around. So those are some of the cultural practices. Then there are also the tradition of singing around New Year's Day, So, and you have that festive feeling where prior to New Year's you'd have rooms in Salt River where people are practicing their songs for that day. So you'd hear these songs, over weekends and so on. So to bring you to that. Even Christmas, you'd have the Christmas choirs singing in Salt River. So yes, so that's just the, like I said, those cultural, those intangible cultural practices that also needs to be documented and needs to be preserved. Some of those traditions have died out. We're also looking at like like furniture. People used to make these emboyer furniture, and artisans used to make these furniture, and that's died, like fringe polishing and so on. That's died out. Even with the ceilings, you would have these motifs that they made, and now it's died out, that kind of trade. So all those trades we need to survey and document them, because some of them have died out, some of them are being passed on to other generations. So those are some of the kind of stories that we have. Yes.
And it's so important to preserve those elements of our culture and history, especially because in this day and age, many people try to capitalize on the nostalgia sort of around certain objects, and like you mentioned, like certain design features, and then it's your own stuff that's still being taken from you and sold back to you at like 10 times the price. So preserving that is so important, and I love that is what the society does. I was walking just towards the house, and my mom had parked a little bit away, and something that really that I really admire about areas like this is everyone sort of knows everyone. And so there were a few people standing outside their houses, and they're just chatting away. And it's very different to the areas that I come from, right? Where everyone seems a little bit too boxed in. And I wonder, how has the community preserved that sort of culture of being people knowing each other so well? You get everyone knows the auntie at the corner shop. Everyone knows the guy that fixes the plumbing. Everyone knows each other. So how do you preserve that as time changes and as people grow old and pass on? And
that's the difficulty, because it's like fourth generation families that stay in Salt River, and then some of them, the children, they move out of the area, and because they're now, economically mobile, and so, and then they start building high walls and stuff like that, which is not good, So that's a difficulty, number one, and number two, we have the issue of gentrification, where because the cost of the houses in the area is going up, the rates are increasing, and now people are forced to sell their houses, and they are forced to move to other areas. So the Salt River Heritage Society is also a registered conservation body. So what that means is that any building plans that come through Salt River, it comes through the Heritage Society. And there was during COVID, there was a building in the Lower Main Road here, and they wanted to do it like an 8-story building, but like single apartment buildings. And we said, but why do you? It's not for families. It's like just for maybe for students, more geared towards students. So that wasn't fitting into the culture, because we're not against development, but we want development that's in line with what the community wants and what the community's needs are. So that definitely, that development wasn't catering for local people. And in fact, like the apartments, I think they looked at like 1.6 million, for an apartment. And the people in South, that's not affordable housing for our communities. So we're looking at developing a charter of development where any new development that comes in, that they try and adhere, or they stick to what, some kind of principles of development that's in favor of community heritage.
One aspect of heritage is the art that's passed down, and your Women's Day event revealed the portrait of Shireen.
Yes.
What other local heroes would you like to see being preserved in that way?
Yes, so one of our programs is called Community Art, and we use art as a means of memorializing the histories and the stories of local people in Salt River. And so we started off, there's how these murals also started, like different contexts, like the Siraj, or the human rights mural, where Judge Siraj Desai is on there. What's his name? Anwar Naigia is on there. Lutfi Omar is on there, the First Minister of Justice, and Benny Keys. So how it came about is that the Zionist Federation laid a complaint against Judge Siraj Desai, and they said, he should be taken off the bench as a judge for supporting the Palestinian cause. And we as Salt River people, felt that we want to stand by Siraj, and we use this opportunity to not only to tell his story about his work, his human rights work in Salt River, but also we celebrated him in a collective manner, because Judge Siraj is not the person he is without his friends, without his comrades. So Anwar Naigia was one person that stood by him, Lutfi Omar, and Benny Keys, Lutfi Omar is also from Salt River.
I didn't know that.
Yes, so that's also, and then...
I know his foundation is in Lylands.
Yes. But he grew up in Salt River. He went to school in Salt River. And then Anwar Naigia is from Home Estate. But way back during apartheid, we started a civic association, and it's called the Salt River Woodstock Home Estate Civic Association. So that's why Home Estate, Woodstock and Salt River were together. And Siraj was on the civics committee, and Anwar Naigia. And they fought against people being evicted, rent eviction. At that time, the Salt River was under a Rent Control Act, and the landlords couldn't increase the rent to more than, like, at that time I think it was like 500-600 rand a month. So we fought for that, So we'd go to the rent board and say, listen, but the landlord can't increase the money, the rent at that time. So they were part of the civic association, but like I said, that's the context. The art didn't just, the mural didn't just come up. Then the second mural we dedicated to Desiree Ellis, the Banyana coach. And she grew up in Salt River, born and bred in Salt River. And her story is also very remarkable. Again, there was debate in the organization, you can't just say, like I said, we want to celebrate people in the collective and not as just a single person. And in that mural, there's heritage aspects in there as well. Like the soccer field, it's called Lily Soccer Field. And the name of the field, everyone calls it Lilies.
Yeah.
But the city doesn't know. It's only the people in Saltover. I'm going to Lilies.
Yes.
Then you know you're going to the field.
Yes.
The city calls it Blackpool. No, they call it Shelley Street because it's of the road. They call it Shelley Street, but everyone else knows it as Lilies. Yeah, and way back, I mean, if historically, I mean, the top field was just for white sports, and the bottom field was like for the normal people, the colored people in the area. So that you had sport divided along racial lines. Yes. So you'd have the South African Indians versus South African coloreds versus South African blacks. In fact, there was a South African Malays as well. So that's how the divide and rule tactic that the apartheid regime used. You know, they demarcated sport along racial lines, and that's also, you know, caused a lot of pain because a lot of these people in Saltover, they, you know, the soccer legends and the cricket legends, if they had the opportunity, they would have been like South African players, yes. But they couldn't reach that because of apartheid. Yeah.
How do you think that's changed now? You know, you mentioned how everyone used to have to play, you know, separately. Has that changed in a way now? Have people now decided to integrate a little bit more?
Well, it's difficult because we don't have economic equality, so people not everyone has equal opportunity to reach that heights, you see, and then we also have these social issues which, you know, people of wealth don't you go through, you know, like gangsterism, like drugs, you know, and Saltover is also an issue, you know, a case in point. I mean, this area used to be called Drug City, and in 92, just before apartheid, before the 94 elections in 1990, sorry, it was in April 1990, we organized a drug march in Saltover, right? And then the governments, they then said they banned the march, and they said they don't have enough police to protect us from the drug dealers in the area. But that was like the eve before the march. Yeah. And the march, the next day people came and said, look, the government can't decide. If you want to go ahead and march, we can. And they marched from the mosque, Tennyson Street. They walked down and they came around here in this road, Addison Road. Mm-hmm. And then we got tear gassed by the police. Now, and that was like how in the entire world where a community, you know, marches against drug abuse to the police, yeah, you know, tear gas a community doing that. And
yeah, it's also ironic because they said they didn't have enough policemen to
protect us, but on the day they had like hundreds of police that just used. And then Maulana Azim Khatib got arrested on that day. Yes, and then we subsequently organized another march, and this time we had like, because now the whole world, you know, we got more media coverage than anyone else, and more people came to the second march. Yes. And that's the day that in fact the hip hop group back in that time, 1990, Prophets of the City, they launched their first album. Okay. Yeah, so that was like also part of our history. In fact, the person that did the mural of Siraj Desai and Tala Omar, they call him Khocha, and he's a graffiti artist, but he started with Prophets of the City. Okay. Yes, so that's how, you know, So it just like became full circle that he was the one, because he's also from Salt River. Yes. He was my neighbor. We grew up together. So he's been doing graffiti since 1990, since that time. Yes, yes.
That's amazing. So, you spoke a lot about the people that live in Salt River and people that have moved out. And I'm just wondering, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the notable families that played a very strong presence in this community, and what they did that made it so inspiring?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's personalities and there's families and so on. I mean, I can there's the one story of Ronald Harrison, right? He painted. He was an artist, and he lived in Rochester Road, and he went to St. Luke's Church, and he was an artist, and he painted Jesus in the image of Albert Luthuli, the ANC's leader, and the Romans as verwoerd, and Foster as the Romans at the time. So that's one story, and he got arrested for that, and he got persecuted for that, and the painting got smuggled out of the country, and it was used by the anti-apartheid movement to raise money. The painting got lost, and then years later it came back. Somebody found it in London in the basement, and it came back to South Africa. This is now after apartheid. So that painting is now in the church, and so nobody knows about that. Yeah. So that person we will celebrate. We will have a art mural in his name or some other. And then there's Ronald Herbold, lived next to Siraj Desai. He, in the 1950s, he was working on a ship. He landed up in Cuba, and they're busy with the revolution, and he says, okay, I'll help you. So he's the only African that fought in the Cuban Revolution with Fidel. And he gets married there, he comes back to South Africa, after apartheid, and he passes away, and he settles down here in South Africa. But I mean, that's another story. Yes. And, we want to also celebrate his contribution, because without the Cubans' intervention, during that time, apartheid wouldn't have been destroyed like it was. We're looking at the Cuban helping Angola and then Namibia, and that's how South Africa got its freedom. So that's two stories, and then there's the contribution of people that started the Salt River Muslim School in Kipling Street. Their contributions, and how we have minutes of how they were discussing. It's a Muslim school, but do we allow Hindus? And they said yes. We shouldn't stop anyone from having the education, which was like remarkable. Like,
Especially in a history that was so segregated.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Because look, Hindus were mostly the shoemakers in the area. Yeah, so we had so most of them worked in the shoe industry, and they were part of the community. Yeah. So they contributed that institutions, but also the first mosque in Salt River in Tennyson Street, and then the second mosque here in Anderson Road, which this year they're celebrating their 100th anniversary. Yeah. So there's been around. So I mean, that's the first mosque, and this is the second mosque. And then we have during colonial times, we have the Salt River Battle of 1510. Okay. And nobody, in our history books, you don't hear anything about 1510. And this battle was fought here in Salt River, and this Admiral de Almeida from Portugal. He was a brutal admiral, and he killed hundreds of people in India, where they colonized India. And what they did was they came to Salt River, and the Khoi people was, they traded with him, and then they stole their cattle, and they stole their women, and captured their women and children. Yes. And this ensued into a battle, when the Khoi found out. And the Khoi came with their cattle, and they used that as a defense, and they killed the Almeida, and they killed I think most of his soldiers, and because of this defeat, the Portuguese monarchy, they said that they couldn't sail around Cape Town for 100 years. So only in the 1650s that we have the next, colonizers coming around here.
Such a monumental moment.
Yes, so that sort of a battle we will also memorialize, and that story needs to be told, and but again also the indigenous, the Khoi's contribution to our history and who we are, that's been completely eradicated from our history. So we're trying to bring this back, even to pre-colonial times, how people used to live here in South Africa.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned like quite a few very historical struggles, especially with the march where you were tear gassed, and I wonder like how does the trauma of those events affect the youth now? We speak a lot about generational trauma, and I'm wondering how that then plays a role in.
Well, I mean, like I said, we are people of disposition, people of oppression, of slavery. So obviously, that trauma is carried down, and we don't know it, but subliminally it comes out, because there's still this search for identity, which is a huge problem. It's people, like I said, they don't have local heroes to look up to. So now we're trying to change that. So we're using heritage to bring people together, to unify people, but also to give them some self-identity, so that they can be proud of who they are and what, and be proud of our history. But also, like I said at the beginning, we don't want to repeat the mistakes of history. If we don't know our history, like I said, we'll just repeat it. And we have like I said, the Salt River battle. We have a story in Salt River. We call it our 9/11, September 11th moment, where in 1985 the liquor stores in the area were tear gassed, and I think the police had a tip-off, and they surrounded the whole Salt River area. And one person by the name of Ibrahim Karls, he lived in the next road, Burns Road, and he just walked across to his neighbor, and the police followed him and they shot him in his head. This was on September 10th, 1985. It's the height of student uprising. The next day, September 11th, we've got the funeral, and the police, they were private police, and they were looking to arrest one of the UDF leaders, Imam Hassan Solomons, who was present at the march. There were about 60,000 people in Salt River, and they marched from here to the Mowbray graveyard. And the anger that the people had, and it was, like I said, it was the height of 1985, and the Caspers, they would have just, trampled over the Caspers. And the police were just on the sides. But these policemen, they were planning to arrest Imam Hassan. And one of the local people confronted these private policemen and said, listen, what are you doing here? You should leave. And then the guy pulled out a gun, and then the scuffle ensued, and this person got shot from the community, and he was a sports cricketer in Salt River, a well-known cricketer, Fatima Hoosain. And the crowd heard that they killed Fatima. They grabbed these private detectives. The one managed to get away, and they killed the other one. And I was present at that time, and I was standing on a car and looking at how, because this is the first time I see somebody getting killed. And you would see people kicking him, and their shoes full of blood, and they stabbing him, and they throwing concrete on his, they pulled all his clothes off, and yet, so it was the first time that I saw violence in that manner, and where they take another person's life. Yes. And that evening I couldn't sleep. I can imagine. Yeah. So that, that's one incident. You've got this anger and all that, but once you see somebody's life getting taken away, it's another story, I've been through where the police shot at us with rubber bullets and tear gas and so on. But when it comes to that moment where a life gets taken away, it's horrific. I remember Maulana Farid Issa throwing himself on the cop, trying to put it, but by that time it was too late. And when they pulled him off, he had a white thobe on, it was full of blood. So yeah, so that's just, that's another story in 1985.
So, all of this, bringing heritage into today's modern day, how do you think is the best way to sort of help youth recognize the importance of preserving heritage?
Well, like I said, it's important that we try and document local histories, and we give a voice to local people. Because once you start, we have an oral history project, and we interviewed old people in the area. And once you hear their story and what they went through to what we are today, then you have a new appreciation for what you have, because they came with nothing, and they went through much harder times than what we are facing. And I think you'll only understand or how to tackle the challenges of today by understanding what happened previously in the past, yes. And if you don't know what happened in the past, you will never be able to tackle the future. Yeah. Because that's what heritage and history is all about, every believer, he's got a historical document that has these stories, and in those stories are lessons. And this is why it's important that we must study those stories.
On that note, thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this conversation. I know I've learned a lot in this, and I'm excited to see what the Salt River Heritage Society has in store for us in the future and for this community, because I can sense that there's a lot that needs to be covered. And I know that will, I really hope that will bring peace to the youth and some consolidation, and so that they can find some sort of place to identify themselves. So thank you so much.
Thank you.